Right before our break, I would like to introduce you to our special in-studio guest today. We have Barry Taff, his background is in biomedical research, and he's a scientist, but he's also a parapsychologist and a screenwriter, and we welcome you to our show.
It's a pleasure to be here, Valli.
Thanks a lot for coming in today. Well, as you noticed right before the break, we do get questions from people out on the street, and they want to know things about ghosts and apparitions, hauntings, things like that. They would like to know, I'd like to ask you, if there was an apparition around us somewhere, how would we know that?
Well, most commonly is you have a visual manifestation. You might see something, you might hear audible noises that can't be accounted for, you might have movement of objects about the house that can't be explained, you might actually feel something, a pressure of some sort, a weightiness of the atmosphere, which may account for it. Or to be more prosaic, you may get a phone call that has a very long distance bill on it. But
well, then in dealing with this, now you're a researcher and you are contacted from time to time to go out on different cases. Could we call them a case?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so who are these people and why do they call you?
Well, I've investigated more than 1,200 cases in the last 20 years, and most of the people that call us are average, normal people who start having unusual experiences for one reason or another, and they want help because they're frightened, they're traumatized, they're scared, and they need answers to questions. And our purpose is to first help them deal with the emotional stress and then try to document the presence of the phenomena objectively.
So would you say that the majority of your cases are in people's homes? Does that seem to frighten them the most, or have you also been to businesses and other places as well?
The majority of our cases have been in homes, yes. That's I think only had 1 or 2 cases in my lifetime that have been in actual businesses, but there have been cases like that we haven't investigated.
Very interesting, because it seems like I don't know anyone right now who hasn't at least had one home, apartment, or someplace that they lived in where they didn't hear something somewhere, and you'll hear them talking about it from time to time, though I don't know that most people are open enough or take on that bravery of that openness to really go in and investigate it. And I personally think it's very important to do that. Tell us about some interesting things you've worked on, because you're also a screenwriter, and I'd like to know how that fits into everything else you're doing.
Well, I got called in to work on screenplays and motion pictures back in the early 70s by a number of different production companies and studios that came to our lab and needed a technical advisor and creative consultant, and they asked me to assist as a script doctor in writing screenplays, and worked for companies such as Quinn Martin, Lorimar, MGM, things of that nature, and ended up working on films like Logan's Run and Demon Seed and Altered States. And then, of course, The Entity came along, which was based on our real-life investigation of a case in 1974 in Culver City.
Mm-hmm. That movie, when I saw it, was really quite frightening. Was the real case as frightening as the movie?
The real case was actually more frightening than the movie. The movie sort of distorted a lot of the information and sort of made it more a little tongue-in-cheek, exploitative. Unfortunately, the screenplay was totally rewritten by the director, and it kind of diluted and weakened the impact of the real story.
That is interesting. So what kind of a problem does that present for a screenwriter also dealing with the reality of apparitions? Is there a problem where you do know certain pieces of information and it is too frightening for some projects to handle?
I don't think it's too frightening. I just think that everyone has their own belief system and perspective, and the director who worked on The Entity happened to have a total disregard and disbelief in this phenomena, so he rewrote the entire screenplay into pure, what I would call camp, schlock, exploitative work, which didn't accurately represent what transpired in the case, and he fired the original effects crew, and what we got was a movie that I was not particularly pleased with.
Very interesting. Well, I understand that you've brought in just a small amount of some still footage that has to do with that Entity case.
Yes.
I believe we'd like to get, to roll that footage.
Okay, what we're looking at now is an actual shot from the Entity case, and you see the main arc of light is framing the subject of the haunting, which was in Culver City. There's a secondary arc right next to her, and this arc is projected in space. It is not bent in accordance with the wall, but seems to be a time lapse of the balls of light we were seeing flying around the room. It's the same way if you lock a camera down and shoot a star, you see a track. This was a track of balls of light flying around the room. Now the next picture is of two arcs taken a few minutes later when we were out of the room, except for the photographer, and these arcs are at 90-degree angles to each other. In other words, they're perpendicular. And we had these analyzed by the West Coast editor of Popular Photography and by computers. They could not even begin to explain the nature or what it is we were seeing, but the glass lens in a 35mm single lens reflex camera prohibits this type of image from occurring, yet it did occur. So it is indeed a phenomenon of nature we cannot explain.
It's interesting to me how when phenomena becomes the topic, how everybody wants to make it like, oh, it's the glare of the glass, it's the something floating through the air, it's whatever it is, but people seem to have this tendency to believe that it has to be something tangible. If it's not tangible, then it doesn't exist at all. And yet, with a researcher like yourself, this is what you go after, is things that are very intangible.
Well, that's true, but what we rely on is our photographic evidence, which we can document and prove was not the result of an artifact or a glitch or a system error in our systems. And these images stand for themselves. They cannot be explained. Most of what we visually observed we couldn't photograph. Most of what we photographed we never saw.
You have brought a piece of footage in with you that backs that claim up exactly, where you, I believe you told me you took a picture into a black room. Can you tell us a little bit about what we're about to see?
Basically, to set this up properly, this video camera was locked down in a room in a hospital, and that was supposedly haunted, and it was let to run, and when we basically played the video back, we were astonished to see something appear on the screen that none of us saw, but people had seen prior to us being there.
Very interesting, and in that state of darkness is the same way I would like us to be able to show that right now.
Okay, now if you watch on the right side of your screen, you're going to see an image form, and it'll take the shape of a face. And there was no one present in this room. The camera was locked down. You see a man's face appearing, very clear brow ridge, eyes, nose, and the whole actual body. But we're going to rerun it again for you. You can see it's very dim, but it's very distinctive. We will be enhancing this piece of footage and bringing it back to you for greater clarity.
Well, that's pretty phenomenal. I don't know if any of you have ever seen anything like that in your home before, but certainly our investigator today, Barry Taff, who's joined us in the studio, has had an experience where this has appeared in footage on film, and I find that to be quite fascinating. And how do you go about working toward proving these things scientifically so people will understand that there are other realms and that they do attempt to reach us, not to scare us, but just simply to reach us?
Well, essentially, it's first objectively determining the phenomena is there by recording it with video, for example, or methods or film methods, and then enhancing it the best we can to get the clearest image and try to determine the nature of what the phenomena is. And then once you prove it's there and determine its nature, you then submit it for analysis, and then the rest is up to the people who analyze it.
So that gives you pretty much because it doesn't come down to hard science at this point, I guess that really makes it a very difficult thing to do, doesn't it?
Well, it's not reproducible in the sense that these types of phenomena don't exist in every nook and cranny of our world. They only exist in certain places at certain times, and they seem to work at their own discretion. In other words, they show up when they want to show up, not when we want them to.
I understand. You brought in a couple of still photos, and before we take our break, I think we should show those still photos and take a look at what those are and describe a little bit about that case.
Yes, on this first picture, you're seeing some white modeling, not the scratch, but the white modeling that's floating in the air. And this is very typical of what people used to call ectoplasm. This was from a case in North Hollywood in 1976 where objects were being flung around the house, apparitions were being seen, blood was dripping out of the fireplace and out of the shower stall. And it was a very unique case because we got to witness a great deal of phenomena while we were there.
Well, I think you brought some other photos. Are all these three photos that we'll be seeing are from that very same case?
Yes, they're all from the same case.
Okay, let's take a look at the second one.
The second photo is obviously Christmas morning opening presents. The white modeling, again, not the scratches, is what was enigmatic on the film. The young lady in the picture is what we call a poltergeist or a psychokinetic agent, and she seems the one who was somehow manifesting this phenomena psychokinetically with her mind. And this modeling is, again, indicative of the phenomena that we've been running into for the last 22 years.
Very interesting. And let's take a look at the very last one. I really like this one a lot.
The third one is a roommate of the first girl and opening a present, and we have the negative, we analyzed, we saw the picture, and there's this incredible mass of white, again, energy in the film, or in the slide, and we cannot make any sense out of it, in the sense that it is not an artifact of the camera, the lens, or the film.
Well, energy is what we're all about, and now it's time for a short pause, and we will be back with you in just a moment. Welcome back. We are in the studio with Barry Taff, who is a parapsychologist, a screenwriter, and we also have some additional guests that have some fascinating footage to show you and a very interesting story to tell about an investigation of ghosts and apparitions that they went on, and let us get to introducing them right now. So you have already met our current guest, who's Barry Taff, who's our parapsychologist, and also we have Barry Conrad in the studio with us, who is a cinematographer, a videographer, and his associate, Jeff Wheatcraft, who is a photographer who has also joined us to tell us about their experiences. Let us first talk about, what was this? Were you called on assignment, or is this something you just heard about? Tell us a little about the assignment you had.
Well, no, actually, Barry Taff, who's with us right now, he was with, or he had got a call from a lady in Southern California, in the Los Angeles area, who said that her house was haunted. She was seeing an apparition of an old man who was appearing in her children's bedroom, and he was also appearing in the kitchen, and he would usually disappear. And there were a lot of other poltergeist types of phenomena that was occurring. So Barry had gotten in touch with me because I had told him that I was interested in videotaping this kind of phenomena if he ever had a good case again.
The video and cinematography work you had done before, had you ever done anything like this before? Was it of interest to you, or tell us about that?
I've always been interested in the phenomena. Like Jeff here, he's read a lot about it, and I have too, ever since I've been very young. But I've never really experienced anything. And I had always kind of had a secret desire to be able to go out and photograph phenomena as it was happening. But I realized it's so rare that I realized it would probably be virtually impossible to really capture something at the time of a haunting. And in this particular case, we went there the very first night to this home. We listened to this lady's story. She told us this crazy story about apparitions, about blood coming out of the walls, about unexplained noises, lamps flying across the room, so that kind of thing. And we listened to the story, and before we left, we decided to check out the attic, because she said that she had seen a disembodied head floating in the attic.
And now, Jeff, I know that because I've already seen the footage, I have some idea of what's going on. So what prompted the union between you and Barry, and then what happened?
Well, I've been working with Barry for quite some time now.
I see.
And he sort of brought me in on this, and I was curious about it. I've always read all the books about poltergeists and ghosts and everything else, but little did I know that something real would actually happen to me.
I guess that's the whole point of a lot of what we're talking about today, is people listen to it or they'll watch a movie or whatever it is, and they are so far separated from the fact that this might be reality, that the fact that it might be reality closes them off to it, to the experience, or puts them into a state of fear. And that's not what we're trying to evoke here at all. We're trying to show that there really are things that you cannot always see with your own eyes that do exist in the universe, and that's what New Age thought is all about.
Absolutely.
So I want to get ready to roll the film and have you both, or Jeff, you describe what happened here. You had a pretty frightening experience. Maybe you can help set it up for us just a little bit.
All right, what we're going to see on this first clip that we're going to show is it was like 2 or 3 weeks into the case, and this particular incident was when I was actually hung in the attic.
What's wrong?
What happened?
You all right?
I told you, get down!
Get out of there.
down!
Right now, Jeff, what happened?
Put something around my neck.
Oh, shit.
Oh, my God.
Jeff, get down
Oh,
right
my
now.
God, I knew it, come on.
Please, get down, please.
What is this, Barry? What is this?
I don't know, just get down out of there.
Hey, you know, you took my glasses, whatever it was.
Oh, shit.
Jeff, please come down.
I gotta get out of here.
Whoa.
It's definitely raising me up.
Jeff, please come here. Get this for me. Get the mic. Get the mic on it. Jeff, here you go, buddy. Here you go. Here you go. What the hell happened? Are you okay, buddy?
Oh, God.
Look at his neck.
Jeff,
come on.
what's behind your neck?
I don't know what's on my
Come
neck.
on, come on down, come on down.
A piece of rope.
Oh, shit.
Gary, get down out of there, buddy.
I knew you should.
Can you find my glasses?
Gary, Jeff.
Look at this. Look at
Jeff,
this.
turn the camera.
Jeff, are you okay?
Jeff,
I'm fine.
Jeff, tell me what happened, buddy.
Well, I don't know, Gary. I told Gary that there was nothing happening up there, and he turned around and came. He was coming this way. All of a sudden, I feel this thing around my neck, and it's got me hanging, and it's pulling on my leg.
You were hanging?
Yeah, I was hanging. Gary had to bring me down.
Look at, look at, look at, look at.
Did it do anything to my neck?
Some of the footage that we're seeing right now, flashing lights and what is that? What are we looking at?
Right, what you're seeing right there, it was the very first night we were in the home. This is shortly after Jeff had been pushed by the entity. He was standing below the attic entranceway, and I was filming a short interview with him. And there was an unexplained flash of light that appeared after we got the tape back on the monitor. We didn't see it at the time.
Does it seem to matter whether you use still footage, movie footage? Does it seem to matter what kind of tape you use? Is there anything like that? Because people are always, out there in the world, they always want to debunk everything.
Well, in the case that Barry investigated, which became the case that became the entity in 1974, they used motion picture film, and the entity, whatever it was, bleached the film, didn't show up. But they did get some still photos, as you saw earlier, and Jeff can answer that about the stills.
Well, it's interesting to point out because we did take Barry's video camera up into the attic.
Yes.
And it completely surged all the power out of the video camera. Now, I did get some stills. I did manage to get some stills. There are some pieces of light here and there that you see on some of the stills. But as far as any video upstairs in this particular attic, we have nothing.
Something like this might be very frightening for some people to see, and it's not really our intention just to scare people. That's not what we're doing. We're trying to open the doors for new information to come in for people so that they'll be more open to that. I mean, if people have a tapping in their garage, shall we say, or a tapping in their ceiling or something like that, maybe there really is someone who might be living there that we can't see. Why do we think, though, that something like this would happen? Where did the string come from that was wrapped around your neck? What else do we know about that case?
That's very odd because we had looked around this attic very carefully and we saw nothing up there. The hanging incident actually took place 2 weeks into the case, and we were just about ready to come out of the attic. We were coming downstairs because Barry said there was some activity downstairs, there were some lights, there were some sounds, and I took one step, just approaching the door of the attic to go down, and as soon as I took that one step, bang, there was something placed around my neck and pulling me to the side of the attic. It eventually hung me on a nail.
Just before that, prior to that, of his being hung in the attic, I was down below with a video camera, and I saw a ball of light that came out of nowhere, flew right in front of me, and disappeared into the curtains. And shortly right after, almost immediately right after I saw this ball of light, I heard something snapping in my ears. I heard what sounded like someone snapping their fingers. And they did it 3 times. It went like this. Just 3 times, and that's when you hear Jeff cry out.
Very interesting. Well, our program for today is almost over, and I just want to thank you all very much for being here. In such a short period of time, we could never hope to really get all of the information. I will be right back after this short message. I want to thank our guests today, Barry Taff, Barry Conrad, and Jeff Wheatcraft, for joining us today on the show. Our program next week will be about psychokinesis, which is the movement of objects with the power of your mind. We have Jack Hout coming on next week. I want to thank you for joining us, and we will see you next week on Exploring the New Age.